cautious so far, Tark. Let's see if you kept anything in reserve.
Enough chatter! Draw some blood!
The Orcs of Mordor come in all shapes and sizes, and in Shadow of War, you may find yourself fighting a lowly captain who's afraid of everything under the sun, or an extremely difficult legendary overlord who's immune to all the attacks that don't already make him mad as hell. However, even the toughest Orcs and Ologs that are a higher level than you can be beaten if you know how the Nemesis system works and how to play it to your advantage. We've compiled several expert tips on how to beat the toughest Orcs in Shadow of War. Go up against any strong captain, war chief, or overlord, and chances are he's immune to something. Arrows, executions, fire, all the stuff you love to kill Orcs with. This can be a real pain, especially when you start fighting even stronger enemies who are immune to multiple types of attacks, which can severely limit your options, but it doesn't have to. Orcs and Ologs with immunities can also have two things that negate their powerful defenses: fear and terror. Even if a captain has immune to execution, you can temporarily disable that perk by capitalizing on their mortal weaknesses and things they are dazed by. If said captain happens to have a fear of Morgai flies or a fear of burning, exposing him to either of those will cause him to stumble about and lower his immunities long enough for you to get in the attacks that were once useless. You can also outright terrify an Orc by finding certain things that cause him to flee the battlefield in terror. These range from attack types, other captains getting killed, or even a particular rival that you can bend to your will and just scare your target with. Once terrified, your enemy will run away as fast as he can and can be grabbed, dominated, or gutted regardless of his health. Of course, as you become more powerful yourself, it's likely that most of your opponents won't have too many mortal weaknesses, or even things that will daze them. There's always a few enemies you come up against who are the definition of bad luck, lots of strengths and immunities, and very few weaknesses. At that point, it's good to remind yourself of your options. If he's tough to attack head-on, build up might by fighting his entourage until you can execute him. If he's immune to that, pepper him with arrows from afar or shadow strike into him. Immune to arrows too? Look for nearby beast bait, cages, or nests that you can disturb to bring in Caragors, Graugs, Ghouls, and Drakes. You can also summon them at will with skills if you're fighting in an isolated area. If physical attacks and beasts aren't working, remember that you have elemental options too. Not only can you detonate grog barrels to great effect, you can also upgrade both Mighty Shot and Elven Light to deal fire, frost, or poison damage that you can swap between as needed. Don't be afraid to pause combat to go back and swap upgrades if the battle isn't going your way, or retreat to reevaluate and identify targets. Lots of captains and war chiefs have few things that will cause them to become enraged, and more powerful orcs sometimes have lots of things that will make them mad. Sometimes literally anything can get an orc riled up. When enraged, orcs deal unblockable attacks with increased damage and are faster, are harder to kill, and cannot be dominated and sometimes not even stopped at all. Take note of what ticks them off so you can avoid this, otherwise you may want to retreat for a bit, or at least put a bunch of orcs between you and your enraged foe so they can start attacking each other. You should also take into account what bonuses and class traits an orc brings to the table. Each class behaves differently, so study each of the advanced classes so you aren't caught off guard when a marksman peppers you with explosive arrows, or an assassin denies you a last chance attempt. Fight those guys very carefully. Epic and legendary enemies also bring advanced epic traits to the mix. Epic adversaries bring 1, while legendary ones bring 2. While this doesn't always make them that much tougher, these perks do have the chance to ruin your day with increased health regen or increased elemental weapon damage. It's easy to keep equipping every new piece of armor or weapon you find as long as the stats look better than the last, but you should pay attention to the bonuses gear can bring. Maybe the new sword you got from an epic orc doesn't deal as much damage, but its critical strikes have a good chance to curse the captain you're up against, who just happens to be vulnerable to curse damage. Sometimes it's worth taking an overall hit to damage output if you can make up for it with special effects. You can even stack similar bonuses from armor and weapons to increase the chance your targets will suffer this extra damage, or mix it up with legendary gear to get set bonuses, like the Mystic set that gives your Dominator Grunts cursed weaponry to complement your own. Keep in mind these are just some of the ways to take down the toughest orcs in Mordor. As long as you can assess what an enemy is weak to, and how to get around a particularly difficult strength or immunity by exploiting its weakness, there's no foe you can't beat with the right skills. Be sure to check out all the possible strengths and weaknesses in the Nemesis system with our list in the Shadow of War wiki, and for everything else on Mordor and more, stick with IGN.